Everyone, and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Value Networks for Servitization webinar. We will be starting bang on 3 o'clock. We just have a few more people to get logged in and registered, so we'll be with you bang on 3. Thank you. Yeah, we're all ready to go. So good afternoon and a very warm welcome from the Advanced Services Group at Aston Business School. This afternoon, we are going to be talking about value networks for servitization. I'm just going to give a couple of introductory slides about the topic of servitization, and then I will run through the outline agenda for today. We will have a couple of presentations, and then we have got plenty of time towards the end for questions and answers. I'm hoping that you can find as many questions as possible throughout the webinar that you would want to post. And Carol and Andy and myself will do our very best to answer these towards the end of the day. So let me move on and give you a quick overview of the Advanced Services Group and what we're doing today. So my name is Ian McKechnie. I'm the Director of Strategic Programs at Advanced Services Group. And this afternoon, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Carol Kapoor, who is our expert and our resident specialist in the creation of value networks through the research that we undertake at the Advanced Services Group. And Carol and I will then have a bit of an interactive dialogue going through some of the elements of the value network in terms of when you use them, what you might want to use them for, and the how, about how you would actually take some of these ideas forward and what your next steps might be. I'm delighted that we've also got an opportunity to hear from Andy Bates. Andy is from Omron in the UK, and Andy has used the model, the value network model, to actually capture Omron's experience. And he's going to talk to us about the process that he went through, give us an overview of what he actually created, and then talk about the benefits of doing so. And as I mentioned, we have a Q&A session which is open to everyone. So if you do use the Q&A button, that will help Christina and myself moderate and manage the questions coming in. And then I'll close just for a couple of minutes at the end, just to summarize what we've completed, talk about the mini guide that we have available for value networks, and give you a bit of a heads up about the next webinar we have in our Servitization Live series. Well, again, I've picked up on who we are. This is just the pictures just to make it real for you this afternoon, to give you a sense of who we all are. And I'm going to start by just giving you a quick overview of the Advanced Services Group. We are led by our Executive Director, Professor Tim Baines. I'm delighted that Tim is the #1 cited academic in the world for the term servitization and advanced services. And as you'll see from the slide there, he is well published in this area in terms of manufacturing strategy. He's the author of the leading book, Made to Serve, which is the textbook on transforming towards a technology-based business through to compete through services. So moving from a product-centric organization, moving towards an outcome-based activity. And we are a combined group of about 30 individuals, a mixture of academics, a mixture of industrial experts, a mixture of business support professionals. And our sole purpose is really to transfer the research from the Advanced Services Group out into industry to help industry take advantage of the tools, the frameworks, the models to help them make their customers much more successful. And part of the work obviously involves our work with Carol with the value network side of it. So we we do a number of things. We're based out of Aston Business School and Aston University in Birmingham in the UK. We focus exclusively on servitization and advanced services, and it is all about bringing the research to life. And we work with a global network of like-minded professionals. Some major firms are moving towards outcome-based contracts, and we're helping them achieve that. And we have a company, ASG Limited, that helps us protect and share the IP that is created with industry and through the research within the group. One of the first things that you'll come across in servitization conversations is this services staircase. And I'm not going to spend a great deal of time going through it, but safe to say that it really breaks into 3 different levels. The lower part tends to be about base service, where you have a product and some consumables that you might want to share with the customer. We have the middle section there in purple and dots, where we have intermediate services, where we start seeing the use of sensors and technology and data to help inform the outcome and the performance of the product and service. But ultimately, what we want to do is get to this top of the services staircase, where we are interested in providing the customer with the capability around the asset, then the process, and ultimately the platform. Some of the work with business, we work with multinationals. We have 10 multinationals, all with $1 billion or €1 billion annual revenues, up to, I think the largest is 19 billion. But we also work with what we refer to as small, medium-sized enterprises. So anything from firms with 7 up to about 125 employees. So it does range. They all have one thing in common though. They all want growth through services. And when Carol and the team at the Advanced Services Group were looking at value networks, one of the things that became apparent was that by using the value network, it helps you identify the elephant in the room. So we will put a much better graphic together to represent this in the future. But it's one of the things that by using the value network, you identify friends and foes within your organization, within your customer relationships, and within the supply chains that you operate. And as a special discount for the webinar today, I think this, I missed the screen there, apologies, went one too quick. We do have a special introductory offer of a digital copy of the mini guide around value networks for servitization, and they'll reduce from the normal £49 down to £29 for those that are taking advantage of the webinar. And at this point, I'd like to hand over to Dr. Carol Kapoor. And Carol, perhaps you can give us a bit of an introduction to the topic and explain the concepts behind value networks.
Yes, thank you, Ian. Okie doke. Just trying to get my screen to work here. Yeah, okay, so that works. Good afternoon, everybody. Give me a second. Technology. Oh, we're stuck on screens here.
I'll advance it if it helps, Carol.
I actually cannot see my own screen, Ian. It's just, yeah, okay, that works, that's fine. Okay, so sorry about that, everyone. Right, so let's begin now. Before we start looking into what value networks are and what they mean for a business, I think it's worthwhile to take a moment to just look at the origin of this concept. And I assume most of you here are familiar with the concept of supply chains, which came to be back in the 1980s. So Keith Oliver formalized this whole idea where a sequence of businesses could be put or sketched as a flowchart, a horizontal one. So to show the flow of raw materials, from raw materials to semi-finished goods and then on to finished products. And by mid-80s, we had Michael Porter, who extended this concept to introduce the idea of value chains to explain how businesses can create and maximize value for their customers. But this concept it quickly received some criticisms from scholars and the then experts on the topic. And then we had a pair of scholars, Norman and Ramirez, and they came up with the idea of value constellations. Now, this was focused on the concept of co-producing value, and it was great. It fit with how businesses were changing in the then post-industrial economy, and constellations soon evolved into networks. By mid-90s, Clayton introduced this term first, and he started referring to value networks. Now, it started off with supply chains, but it evolved into something deeper. It was widening the thinking about, around value creation. So with supply chains, with value chains, we were talking about a single firm, linear logic for creating value. But then there's this shift, it's come with value networks thinking, which looks at everything from a multiple firms perspective. There is no specific order in how value is created, but value is co-created with the value network thinking. So then what are value networks, basically? So when you think of, sorry, everyone, again, this is something, again, to do with my screen. I just lose the grip of the screen. It doesn't work. Right. So what are value networks then? You have to think of value networks as a group of stakeholders who are interdependent on each other. They could be from the same industry, they could be from different industries. They have a shared purpose. They are working together to achieve the same goal, which is of creating value for the host business. Now, the entire concept of value network is resting on this notion of shared purpose, and they're sharing costs and they're sharing risks. Ian, if you don't mind, can you just pull me on to the next slide, please? Because my screen freezes for some reason when I do it. Thank you. Now, let me show you an example. So this is a model of a very simple value network. It is partial, and I've kept it very simple here, very small, to give you just an idea of how it looks in reality. And you'll see it in the upcoming slides and in Andy's presentation, that a model of a value network is intricate. It has lots of useful information, but for the time being, let's just look into this one. So the three fixed components of a value network. The first component that you need to know of, or which you'll see here, are the stakeholders that participate in a network. Now, these are people, they're organizations, they're individuals, they have a designated role in the network, and most of the value networks will be made up of a mix of both internal and external stakeholders. So when I say internal stakeholders, it could be employees of a firm, or even like an entire team, a field service team, a service development team, sales team. So they can be represented as one stakeholder. And the external stakeholders are the likes of suppliers, investors, customers. Sometimes we can position competitors here, your third parties. And the second, so the rectangular boxes you see here, basically in the figure here, the purplish reddish boxes. Magenta boxes are all the stakeholders, basically. So you're seeing four stakeholders. And the second fixed component is at the transaction. Now, if you see, you can see one directional arrows here, and they're actually showing what's happening between two stakeholders, and they're showing the direction of this transaction. Now, whatever is happening between two stakeholders will result in a deliverable. So there is something of value that is being passed on, or which is being moved from one stakeholder to another. And this is the third fixed component here, which is a deliverable. And it can be tangible, it can be intangible. So when I say tangible, I don't mean physically tangible, I mean contractually tangible. So the solid lines that you're seeing, I'm showing you all the tangible deliverables, the dotted lines are showing you intangible deliverables. So when we say tangible, or anything contractual, this is something that will directly generate income for the business. If a business will not deliver these things, or if a stakeholder will not deliver these things, then you do not get paid. So delivery of a service or fulfillment of an order, those will all come under tangible deliverables. And an intangible deliverable is to do with the non-contractual knowledge. It could be favor that one stakeholder passes on to another. So no one's paying for them directly. but they are absolutely essential in running the network smoothly or running things smoothly within a network. So it could be some sort of market intelligence, but you're not paying for it, that sort of intelligence. Now, here, so for stakeholders, you see the arrows, those are the transactions, the text between the arrows are the deliverables that are going. So basically, if I had to pick one here, you are looking at the manufacturer. Manufacturer is passing on requirement specifications for equipment to the technology supplier, which is a tangible deliverable. Now, if I can go to the next slide, please. Christina, Ian, thank you. So I won't go into the specifics here, but in the mini guide, there's a detailed, the previous one, please. There's a detailed set of instructions to help you correctly identify the three fixed components that I've just spoken about. So we tell you in the mini guide about what's the right way of identifying a stakeholder, a transaction, a deliverable, just to make sure that you're capturing the right information pertaining to your value networks. So Ian, that's about the introduction to the topic.
Okay, thank you, Carol. We have got some questions coming through on the Q&A, so that's really good to see. But could you maybe give us an overview of when you think it's the best time to use a value network?
Yeah, I can do that. If somebody can move me to the next slide, please. Right, so we've just spoken about creating a model of a value network, and they are really helpful because they help you see or visualize the current scenario. So what is the as-is scenario? And then you can also map out a potential scenario, which would be a to-be scenario. And this will basically form these, these visualizations will form the basis or will provide you or give your business a foundation to carry out internal debates and discussions that you can really use to inform strategic decision making internally. So in the first instance, it's useful when a new service is being developed. So let's say the executives, managers are in the process of charting down everything relating to a new service offering. So a value network model will help you identify stakeholders, will help you identify which relationships are important for value creation, which stakeholder is the best for undertaking different transactions or, these important relationships or key relationships that you've identified, which stakeholder is a better fit, and you can visualize how the stakeholder could possibly potentially interact with the other stakeholders, what value could result from it, where there might be missing stakeholders, for example, or maybe a conflict between stakeholders or some sort of duplication where you have two stakeholders doing the same thing. And the best part is you can create multiple models, iterations using different combinations of stakeholders to estimate which stakeholder combination or which combination of transactions are likely to create most value for your service offering. In the second instance, it's useful when you're just reviewing an existing service. So let's say the executives and managers want to examine a current service and they're looking for ways of improving it. They're looking for ways of protecting that service offering. So the model will actually show you which stakeholder, who's doing what and how much value each stakeholder is creating where in the network. And then you can use these insights to identify areas within your network where you can increase the value. You can possibly pinpoint where new market entrants are likely to emerge or any other event that could actually disrupt your service offering. So Ian, these are the points in the servitization journey where value networks can be really useful.
Okay, thank you, Carol. And perhaps maybe extending that a bit by explaining some of the benefits of using a value network.
Yeah, I can do that. So next slide, please. All right, so when we talk about services, advanced services, so many of the executives that we see in manufacturing firms who are looking at offering more advanced form of services, they face all sorts of questions. We often come across executives who are struggling with questions like how will the relationships with dealers and distributors change? Which distributors should they work with? Or what do technology vendors mean? What is their role going to be in possibly pushing the service innovation? Are they going to be an opportunity, or are they going to bring opportunities, or will they turn out to be a long-term threat? So some of these questions basically require revisiting your stakeholder relationships. And some of these questions exist because of the difficulties around communicating how a network can come together, or how different stakeholders will come together to deliver the service offering. Maybe there are problems because a customer desperately needs assurance that a credible system is in place to deliver a service offering, that the host business is capable of delivering these things. Now, things like that. So value networks can, or model of a value network can really help address these questions, these challenges. More specifically, we can use them, or you can use them as a decision-making tool or as a communication tool. So if I take you first through the communication part, it's very intuitive. The more, the further down the slides we go, you'll see it's a very intuitive tool. It is easily communicated to the stakeholders. It readily supports a call to action. So let's say executives can use, if you needed to actually communicate to your relevant partners or customers to, let's say, show the collaborators of the new service offering, or show how these new collaborators are now producing superior value in comparison to with whom you were working on your previous offering or your previous partners. It's just one example, but you can use the tool to communicate technical changes internally, to communicate value exchanges internally and externally. And then if you were to look at it as a decision-making tool, an understanding of a value network can actually help a business make very informed decisions whether or not to collaborate with certain stakeholders. Because when you start to look at a full-length analysis of a value network, it is capable of revealing how much value each stakeholder is bringing for the host business. So managers and executives will be able to tell which stakeholders are creating most value or carrying most risk. You understand more about the corrective actions that are needed where in the network, so your stakeholders can create more value for you. So more sort of optimizing the performance of your stakeholder mix. And in some cases, you can also identify competitive threats, which can then inform your strategy across different stages of your business operations. So you would know what changes you need to introduce. So so you can maximize profits for your business. You'll be able to locate gaps. And by gap, I mean, maybe there is a value conversion opportunity that has been overlooked. Maybe something has been missed by the current set of network actors, which can now be pinpointed and rectified. You'll be able to pinpoint conflicts, some internal, some external. And when we talk about external, maybe you'll come across a situation where your competitors are already doing something, and mapping a value network has actually showed you that entering that area with this set of offerings, service offerings, may not fetch you any desirable results and things like that. So that's how they're beneficial, Ian.
Okay, thanks, Carol. I'm seeing some questions coming through the Q&A. Can I just remind delegates on the webinar just to use the Q&A function, please, rather than the chat, so that we can manage them, because those that we don't get a chance to cover in the webinar, we will take offline and send details out to everyone. Carol, so you've given us a bit of an idea and an overview about the best time to use a value network and the benefits of it. How could you perhaps use the value network to help with analysis of new partnerships or opportunities?
Yeah, I can show you that. If you move to the next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so this here is our joint right for the moment. Now, we call this the value network for service tool, which is what the V in Forest stands for. The different ways in which businesses, today are using different models to represent their value networks. There are many different variations of such models, like the one that we put here. And when we looked at them from the services perspective, we found that some of them were focused more on the product or the service and not on the people or the firms which interact to co-produce value. But when we talk about value creation, it's most obvious in how people, how firms interact and co-create. So not capturing such relationships is basically risking not capturing how a business is creating value. And we noticed that there were some models that were leaning more towards depicting a sequential flow, and some didn't capture the intangibles. And then all of this was just increasing the risk of us reinforcing a production-based logic, which was not, which just meant that those sort of representations or models could not fully explain how a network of stakeholders could create value for a business. But we eventually found this one model, and it's called Werner Ali's value network model, which was the closest representation to how businesses create value today. And Ali's model is more involved, but again, there was this problem with the model where it was too comprehensive. It did not have any start points, any end points. It was complex to read. So the ASG brains came together and we developed a modeling template, which is this. It captures stakeholders, their transactions, their deliverables, but over the 4 stages of what we see as is a life cycle of a service. So as you can see here, we covered the design stage, the installation, delivery, and then we go all the way up to the decommissioning and recommissioning stages of a service. And in the process, we developed a 4-step process basically to how to model a value network, and we show how such a model can then be used to produce sequent analysis that can inform a company's service strategies. So what we've done here is, if you look at it, the starting point of every model has to be about what system is being modeled and why. So when you're modeling a service, the what of a business model is very important. What is it that a network of stakeholders are coming together to design and deliver a service? And that's what we capture here at the center of this of the template, where we are asking you to define the service offering. So basically, you will end up describing your business model here in terms of the outcome of the service offering that you're designing or developing or intend to deliver. And then you need to know the why. So basically, the purpose or the reason for creating the model should be described. Maybe you want to explain to one stakeholder how your service will work in practice. So that's your why, and we put it here right at the top. Then you move to the second step, which is to identify the stakeholders that will be represented in such a model. And this model, it's not a job for a single person. We expect a group of individuals or like an entire team to come together to consult with each other to identify these different stakeholders in transactions, etc. So as you progress, you'll see the model will come to life, but to do it efficiently, it is really important to know what is a stakeholder, which stakeholder should be included in the model, where to position them on this value network template. And the mini guide guides you through the fine details to get this right. And then the other thing to be aware of here is a stakeholder can appear in more than one stage of a service's lifecycle. So you can put them in more than one quadrant of this template. Then the third step basically is you mapping the transactions and the deliverables. We've spoken about it already, so I won't repeat it. And then the fourth step is where you're verifying and validating the model. So when you're verifying what you put down as a model, you're basically going back and asking yourself if the model contains all of the stakeholders and transactions that you would expect to see, all the behaviors that you would expect to go on or happen in this kind of a stakeholder mix for your service offering. And in validating, again, you compare these and you ask yourself about how these would feature in the real world. So if we can move to the next slide, please. We can show you how a fully populated model of a value network looks, and this is what it is. It looks complex, but this is all of this is what you already know, and this is mapping your reality. So this is a value network for a manufacturer. We call it the alarm company in our mini guide, and they have a long history of providing alarm systems for elderly and vulnerable people in their homes. Now, they want to offer a proactive service called assisted living, and that can improve the quality of these elderly people. That's what you see at the center here of the model that we've captured, because we captured the what there. And then one of the challenges they face in bringing this service to the market is explaining to the health service stakeholders how the service is going to work in practice and their role in its success. And that's why you see at the top that we've described here in the center. They want to explain this to their health service stakeholders. So we capture the why there. Now, for the sake of simplicity, can we please go to the next slide? Here, now I've only extracted the service design quadrant here just to blow it up for you, to show you what's happening, so that you can really appreciate the details that go into the model of a value network. Now, here you can see the stakeholder boxes have slightly changed than the one that I showed you in the previous slide with the purplish boxes. Now, what we've done here is the rectangular boxes are capturing three-part stakeholder information. So we first establish who the stakeholder is. Like I said, it can be individuals, firms, someone who can initiate interaction and engage in decision-making. So basically here you see the occupational specialist. I'm just going to pick in one as an example. So you see the occupational specialist here as the stakeholder. And the second part of the information that we're capturing here is what are they responsible for. So here we are looking to find what the role of each stakeholder is. And the simplest way is to describe the activity they perform in the network. Like, developing the system design, delivering the equipment. In this example here, the occupational specialists are undertaking needs assessment. They're assessing the health needs of the elderly people. So that's what we put here. And then we are basically establishing how they do their job in the network, which is the third part of the information. And it indicates any skills, any resources, any competencies that enable these stakeholders to do their job in the network. Now, every stakeholder has access to a set of assets. Think of these as their strengths. So it could be their ability to extract market data or technical expertise. And here, it is the fact that occupational specialists are indeed the health experts, and they can effectively do the needs assessment. And I've already shown you the deliverables and transactions and spoken about tangibles and intangibles. So let's just skip that part here. But of course, you can see them here. And they are the crucial bits of a value network model. Right. Now, I want to talk a bit about analyzing the model of a value network. So if you can please move to the next slide. Thank you. Right. So the whole purpose of a value network is basically to equip practitioners, like many of you here, with a tool that allows you to create a model of how the stakeholders, your partners, your customers, your dealers, your distributors, anyone you work with, to be able to put them in a structured arrangement that allows you to see how you, with them together, can create value for your customers, how you can turn profits for your business. And as you've seen, a value network model will give you a fresh perspective of how you operate your business. And it doesn't end with just the mapping. There's a lot that goes on with the analysis, and you can generate meaningful insights for your business. So the first part of the analysis, as we put it in the mini guide, will show you how to complete or basically how to make sure that your value network is complete. It will give you the confidence that all the stakeholders and transactions are in place for the design, installation, delivery, and decommissioning of the service that you intend to deliver. And with this table here, the mini guide explains how to work with this table, but this will extract an analysis that will show you if your value network is incomplete, if a stakeholder is absent or needs to be replaced, or where a transaction is lacking, or where there is duplication, or where there could be a redundancy. So there are many ways in which such a list can be used. If I had to take an example, if we just consider the alarm company's example, now they could end up finding out, or they did actually when we created the value network analysis for them, they found out that there were two stakeholders who were doing similar jobs, but in their case, it was important because they were catering to two different, each stakeholder was catering to a different segment of their customers. So it worked for them. But a decision can be made if about who, which of these stakeholders should be dropped from the network in terms of duplication. Or if, let's say, alarm company decided to eliminate or replace a stakeholder, in this case, the occupational specialist, then they readily know from this list, because if you look at, when you look at the list where we, explain in the mini guide, you get a list of enablers. And if alarm company want to replace occupational specialists, then they know from the list that the new provider should have health expertise to support proactive care. So things like that. Now, the second part of the analysis, can we please move on to the next slides? Thank you. Will reveal, this is the second part. Now, this is to do with stakeholder roles. And by that, I don't mean what they do in the network. I mean what they do in the network, but how is it going to affect you as a host business? So this part of the analysis will reveal the benefits and risks of working with different stakeholders based on their performance. And you'll be able to group them. And these are the groups that we've created. So we call them the value champions or value trainers, the value prospects or value villains. So this will allow you to categorize your stakeholders. So when we're talking about champions, we want you to think of stakeholders who are actually strengthening your value network. They are repeatedly bringing value to your network, or maybe they're triggering some sort of breakthroughs. So they are an important part. So you categorize them as, you put them in the value champions column. And then we move on to value trainers. And these are the stakeholders whose deliverables are actually making your value network weak. They may be slow in doing their job, and this may be introducing some sort of inefficiency in the network. And I've just included one example here in the interest of time. So if you, Christina, Ian, if you just give one click, it's just going to appear. Can you just click on the presentation, please? Right, so this example here. Now, the social care provider here has been identified as a trainer by alarm company because the reaction time is too slow for the business model to be reliable. And it has basically a knock-on effect on their other stakeholders and what they're doing, and it affects the overall output of the network. So then there's the third category, which is of value prospects. Now, these will be the stakeholders who are bringing you new opportunities. They might be doing more than they are already expected to do for a network, or they could do more, but they are underexplored right now in terms of their capacity within the network. So you see potential in them, and those will be categorized as value prospects. And in the last dangerous category that we have is of value villains, and they're threatening the success of your value network. So they might deviate, let's say, from what was agreed in terms of their participation, or something that they're doing might be causing disruption across the whole network. Then the last thing I'd like to show you is the final bit of the analysis. Can we please go to the next slide? Right. Thank you. Now, so this one is to do with, now, here we've done the stakeholder categorization. Now I want to show you what can you do with the stakeholder categorization. Now that you know that each category impacts your business, you start to think of what to do about what you've learned about them. You'll be able to build policies on how to manage them, manage these stakeholders by basically reflecting on how they've performed. So the result will be a set of future actions for each of these 4 stakeholder categories that we've just spoken about. So if we had to, let's say, come up with future actions for value champions, you know they make your network strong, you know their deliverables have a positive impact on the service offering. So basically any policy, any future action should be in the direction of making sure that of their long-term participation as champions in your value network for services. Then when we move on to value trainers, you know that they're putting your network at risk by not performing as expected. Your policies should essentially address the root causes of the weak performance, and you should be able to come up with a plan to mitigate them or replace these stakeholders. Now, because I showed you a value drainer example earlier in the previous slide, can I have another click on the slide, please? Thank you. Now, I've included the same stakeholder here. So I showed you that for alarm company, the social care provider was the value trainer. So in terms of future actions, the alarm company actually put a policy in place to mitigate the slow reaction time of these providers. So they introduced some sort of horizon scanning, which could give them an early warning of any potential problems and basically help them with the planning of resources. Then we have the value prospects in terms of future actions. You know they're creating new opportunities for growth within your network. So what you will do is explore what can be done to reveal their full potential, and potentially what can be done to extend their participation in the network, not lose them from your network, basically. And as for value villains, they are creating havoc in your network. Their presence is not really necessary. So either you come up with something that mitigates, your policies should be directed at mitigating this by removing them, or basically putting in place some balancing action and utilizing the goods of them, but avoiding the dangers that they may bring to you. So that is about the analysis, Ian. So this is.
That's fabulous, Carol. Thank you. I think what you've demonstrated there is that it can be complex, but it can also be very easily followed. But it is based in the research. I think when we give, I'll just in the time that we'll give now to Andy to hand over and change screens, perhaps I can maybe just give you a little bit of background to Andy. Andy is the Service and Solutions Manager at Omron in the UK. Omron look after 4 key sectors: healthcare, industrial automation, inspection systems, and electronic components. And we had the pleasure of having Andy with us at a roundtable event last September, where we got our global partners together. And Andy took the example of the value network that Carol presented and then applied it to Omron. So Andy, would you just like to take us through and give us just an overview of your experience and the value that it brought to Omron?
Yes, absolutely. Can you just confirm that you can see the value model there?
We can see you, Andy, and the slide. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Carol. Yes, as Ian said, I'm the Service Solution Manager at Omron, and I suppose the kind of area I work in is the industrial automation sector. So we do have a healthcare business and other parts of the business, but the main focus for me is that industrial automation sector and providing products and services within that sector. So originally, when I started using the value model, I realized that I kind of had that situation where I had a value model for every service. And in particular, I wanted to focus on one of the services we provide, which is a data science service. So it's effectively an OEE type service. It's allowing us to report back to customers where their micro stoppages are, where they're losing, where they've got inefficiencies within their machine, machinery production line or whatever it may be. So we have a kind of escalating service that takes us from an initial kind of consultation right through to a deliverable, but they're all separate services. And originally I was using the value model, should we say, one value model per service, and it worked fine. But what I wanted to do was slightly modify the value model, which I can report, although it looks quite complex, it's actually quite easy to modify to get it to fit with your business and what you're trying to do. So I wanted to be able to visualize all of that service in one place. So the 3 tiers of escalation and our decommissioning service, all the stakeholders, and how the value changes depending on where we are in that journey with the particular customer. So as you can see here, one of the first changes I made was that it was aligning the value model with the services we can actually deliver, rather than using it as like a kind of open thinking tool. You know, for me, it was to get that clarity in what we were trying to do. I needed to align with what we could actually deliver in the marketplace at that moment in time. So as you can see here, our kind of first service is this, we just call it a data scan. And effectively, it's just a viability report with a customer. You know, does the customer want to go on a data science type journey, or are they just putting their toe in the water? You know, have they got the equipment, or is the condition of the equipment they've got even suitable for us going on this kind of journey with that particular customer? So it's you know, it's a very inexpensive entry-level service, a consultation with a report, and there's very few stakeholders involved. It's pretty much handled entirely by Omron, should we say Omron Corporation, the wider Omron group, departments within that, and a relationship with the end user. So it's a very tight, little, easy network to put together. So I've got my, you know, the sales team bringing the lead in, and we've got various experts who take over and take part of the communication on. And the key thing is here is this yellow box, which is actually our data science team. And how are they involved? Do they have a direct relationship with the end user yet, or are they working through us? Again, not only trying to decide where the value is, but where are the communication paths within our service as well. And for me, every time there's an arrow, there's also a communication path. So it allowed me to visualize that. But at every point within our value model, there's a decision to be made. So we also are using it to cover some of our process as well. So in this, the decision is, do we even bother to progress? Does the customer really want to go on that journey with us? Can we give the customer what they want? Is what they're asking for impossible? So at every point, there's an option for us to pull out of the service. We then move on to the next service, which is kind of a machine sanity check. So now we're installing equipment on a machine's customer, and we're gathering data over a period of time, and that might be over 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, however long it takes. So now it became obvious to me that, one, we need what we call our solution partners or system integrator. You know, we don't go out and install things. We assist, we help, we deliver services, but you know, we don't turn up in vans with toolboxes and things of that nature. So we need a partner. So we need a partner to introduce into the service at that point. Not only that, it's getting more complicated. So we need project management skills, because you know, this whole thing, we've got various stakeholders to manage now. We've got people on site. We've got all kinds of things going on. So it became apparent then we need project management. We need our team over in Europe to just keep an eye on things and make sure we're developing the service in the right way. We've got our data team, and we've also got our local technical support teams now involved, because we're going beyond what we were doing before. And again, it's also allowed me to highlight, well, who should be talking to who. One of the biggest problems, certainly I could report that we've had in the past with service deliverable, is too many people talking to one person, or too much information going into one person, or information just going everywhere. You know, we can't get hold of that person, so we'll contact that person and that person and that person. 50 emails later, we're all answering the same question. So it also allowed me to identify where those communication paths are. But again, there's an option here. Do we, from a process point of view, do we continue with the service, or do we decommission at this point? If we progress again, we're moving into an area now where the customer, we've given them a report. They understand where they're losing, should we say, where they're losing efficiency within their production line, on their machine, etc. But to really give them what they want, they now need products we can't supply. So they need, for example, steam sensors and water temperature sensors, all kinds of things that we might not necessarily have, or we're specialists in. So now we're bringing in a third-party supplier as well into the value network. Well, what value are they bringing? Who are they going to communicate with? Who's managing them to make sure we deliver a good service? Now, this is where I made the biggest change to the 4-box system that Carol presented. I wanted in the value model as well to be able to shift from, at this phase, service being commissioned and developed, and then into an operational service. And as you can see between these two boxes, the stakeholders involved when the service is operational is vastly reduced from the stakeholders involved when we're developing. But I needed a system that allowed me to switch backwards and forwards between the two. So if a customer comes on to us and says, well, that's fantastic, I'm loving the reports, I'm loving the information, but what would be really good is if I could have a bit more information, or we've put this other part onto the machine and we need to understand that now, that I could very quickly switch back, re-engage all these stakeholders to allow us to do the development. When we're up and running, switch back into an operational mode. So I added that additional box there. And as I say, the model allows that flexibility. And then finally, we move to our decommissioning. So who are our stakeholders for decommissioning? When do we need them? How does the communication work? Who's going to handle the termination of this service contract, for example? But also, how are we going to improve as a business? So who are we going to involve in our PDCA processes and our continual improvement processes, so we build a better service next time? So constantly feeding that back into the value model as well. So yes, we kind of took what Carol's done and what she's been working on, and I've added some process stuff in there as well to try and document how it would actually work, how it would be delivered, and who's involved at each phase. So I'll stop sharing now, Ian. So
lovely, thank you, Andy. As we go back to the live screen again with the Q&A slide, can I perhaps just pose one question to you, Andy, before I go to Carol? One of the things that we hear regularly about the level of insight that comes from using ASG's research models, and I think you've provided a fine example there. Was there any insight or new analysis you discovered using the value network that was a surprise to you?
Yeah, quite a lot. Some of the main areas of insight were that, I'll say the biggest thing is that if you can't draw it or you can't get into that model, it's either too complicated or you're not clear on what you're trying to deliver. And I think certainly for me and for us as a team, it made us actually realize that we perhaps weren't as clear on it as we needed to be. Because if you just start, should we say, brainstorming with that model, it can very quickly turn into chaos. And I would say our first one I'd got a lot of stuff on there, but it was unbelievably complicated. And what that certainly made us do was take a step back, look at the whole process, and realize that what are we actually trying to deliver? What's the end value for the customer? Not what are we trying to create? What is actually the end result? So that was a key thing. The other thing was it allowed me to reduce the amount of stakeholders, because our original model, and when we started it, as Carl was explaining, do you actually need all these people, all these departments involved? And it allowed me to rationalize the amount of stakeholders, but also then present to the stakeholders who are left and emphasize to them how important that they are in the delivery of this service, and how the only way we can achieve a success is with you all doing these particular tasks in this order. But there were, I would say that we probably got too many stakeholders originally, and I would say that we probably didn't have a completely clear idea on what we were trying to achieve. And putting everything into the value model allowed us to really refine where we were going, what we wanted to do, and who we needed around the meeting room table when it came to moving the service on.
That's fabulous, Andy. Thank you. And I'm just going to go to the first question we've got. And Raj, I do appreciate your patience on this, because you put it in some 30 minutes ago. But if I can open it up to maybe Carol or Andy, how does the concept of value networks relate to systems thinking or innovation concepts? Carol, is that one you could pick up, please?
I could. We haven't looked much into this. I have to be honest about it. But so value networks and system thinking, system dynamics have been traditionally used separately. Experts. So basically, what you would see is any expert in value network will basically come up with a diagram of how businesses will work, while experts in system dynamics will follow, causal loops. They'll do with stock and flow diagrams. But you can use these two approaches together, and you can get two different perspectives on how value flows through the system. And I mean, when we were actually looking into doing value networks for services, I did come across some of the bridging processes, basically where problematic resource flows would be picked from value networks, but then each flow, the system's design thinking would be applied, and then for each flow they would associate or attribute of value, and then there would be some sort of horizon plotting happening there, and that would actually show how dynamic the behavior has been for those problematic resource flows. So there is overlap. There has been work done in combining value networks and systems design, but of course, I'm not an expert on it, if that helps.
Okay, thanks, Al. And Ben, earlier on in the function, had posed a question about being interested in the notion of value and how that could perhaps reflect the triple bottom line, i.e. Economic, social and environmental, because he recognised that value could be created across all three of these categories or destroyed across categories. Is that something you could comment on?
Again, it's not done any work on this, but we do know that. Oh, sorry, I just got distracted by the other question that's just popped in. But we do know that value network analysis has always been integrated with other business tools. There have been examples of Boeing, Cisco, Telenor, basically integrating value networks to produce focused analysis of their business operations. We do know that lean manufacturing techniques have been combined with value network analysis. So before you actually go to a process analysis stage, you can discover any breakthroughs, or the social economic factors can be taken into account. Again, when I was talking about system dynamics, locating structural problems and combining with value network analysis is used, but unfortunately, I don't have specific insights into how this can be applied in terms of SAT.
Okay, thanks, Howell. I mean, that's perhaps, Ben, we'll probably take that one offline and come back to you and have a conversation, but it's a really interesting topic given the value of servitization to sustainability and environmental measures, including circular economy. I'm just noting in the chat function, Dr. Sharma, we do have more examples of value drainers on social care, and we will share these with the delegates after the event. I now have a final question from Tin Hinen regarding the importance of value networks as an antecedent of financial performance of servitized firms. Is that an answer or a response, perhaps Cavil or Andy, that you can pick up on?
Just looking at the question, sorry. Andy, do you want to go for this one?
Just have a look. Financial performance. Right. Okay. We're not far down we're not far enough down that road yet to understand. We will use it to understand the financial performance, but I've very much left it around getting our head around the process and who needs to do what at this particular moment in time. we're quite early on in our advanced services journey. So I'm not at the point where I can comment on that completely.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Perhaps Christoph has posed a question then about Carol mentioning creating models. Is there a response we can give about the methods and tools that are used for the illustration and modelling? You know, whether that's qualitative and or quantitative.
Brian, I'm just thinking maybe this question was posed before, might have been posed a little bit early on during the presentation, because it could have been that happened before I explained the tool. Okay,
thanks, Carol. Well, let me just close the Q&A session because I'm just conscious of time for everyone. We do have another webinar coming up under our Servitization Live series called Servitization Meets Sustainable Supply Chains on the 16th of February. Details are on our website and will be on social media. So we'd be delighted if you could take time to join. We have Dr. Denise Taylor, who's a sustainability practitioner, joining us, and Mark Wood, who's the owner of the Alliance Procurement Solutions. So we'll be inviting them along on the 16th of February. I've already given some details about the different types of publications and the value network that we've got on our shop within Advanced Services Group. And I'd really just like to thank all our delegates this afternoon for joining us. We would be interested in any stories that you've got about your own attempts or successes at value networks. So please send us an introductory email and we'll pick up on that. And then finally, really just from me to thank Christina for making the webinar happen, and to Carol for such an illuminating presentation on the research that you undertake, and to Andy for bringing it alive with the views and experiences of industry. So without further ado, we are bang on time, and I will thank everyone for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.